Hello, everybody. I'd like to introduce you to Tim Fawkes from Solvares Group. Thank you very much for joining us today, Tim.
Thanks for asking me, David. Good to
Absolute
see you again.
pleasure. Please tell us about your business, what it does, and where it fits in the supply chain cycle, please.
Yep. So Solvares Group is a German originating software business. It consists of three different divisions. It's field service management is one area, field sales management and logistics software as well. And I obviously sit in the logistics side of the business. The aim of the business is to be the number one resource optimization software in Europe. And within the logistics side, we've got two systems platforms. We've got Afeo, which is a fleet optimization scheduling platform and final mile execution. And then we've got LP2, which is our carrier management software for shippers, with global kind of a large supply chain managing multiple carrier environments. Yeah.
And where would it fit in the supply chain? So would that be big? Your ideal customers, would they be sort of companies that are doing, full loads, part loads, last mile,
Yeah,
or a mix of all the above?
mix of all of it, and the more complexity, the better. Which you sometimes you can't get away with within the transport environment. Everybody wants to keep it simple and sell full loads, but the reality is the customers want different things. So it's about simplifying the complexity of transport, particularly complex transport tariffs that carriers have in place with lots of surcharges and it's really about making sure the right carrier is selected on a job by job basis for optimizing transport, and then being able to basically execute that and record what's happened throughout the transport process, so that you can report accurately and sort of immediately after at the event. Yeah.
No, thank you. And just more for my own interest. So, if
Yeah.
you have a partner or someone that's not performing particularly well, can you, can you switch them out of the system for a period until they get themselves back on track? Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the decision of that is the customers. So we're selling just the software. So, but the system is very sort of scalable and flexible. So you can manage your carrier partners. You can measure performance, and then you can kind of put corrective programs in place as you would normally with your carriers, and you can manage all of that through the system. So yeah.
Oh, fantastic. I appreciate
Yeah.
that. I asked everyone the same question, and it's often a similar answer. It'll be interesting if it's with you as well,
Yeah.
Tim. What brought you into the lovely logistics sector?
Well, I'll let you guess there, David. It's totally by accident. Yeah, interestingly, I graduated in 1991, which is quite a while ago now. But that was right in the middle of a recession, and it was really difficult to get jobs, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I kind of, after applying for jobs, when I was one of 250 candidates in an area that I wasn't particularly interested in, I ended up doing kind of a government-sponsored placement through industry. It was actually via Salford University, but then it sort of they had links into industry, and I was fortunate enough to get a placement with a business called Harris Distribution. And Harris Distribution became TDG, or was part of TDG, which became Norbert Dentressangle, bought by Norbert, and then became XPO. So it was unpaid for 6 months. So you can imagine that, being on the dole for 6 months, but having this interest and getting this interest within logistics. And I worked in the business development function as an analyst, so I'm good with numbers, and it was I really enjoyed it. I never looked back. So I've seen some really interesting businesses and how they work, and from an analytical point of view, you can go in and get to see lots of different businesses. And yeah, it's good.
Yeah, and like most of us, we seem to have
Yeah,
fallen into it, but once you get into it, you really enjoy it.
yeah,
So,
exactly.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Next question. So tell us about your business sector and how you see the sector developing in the next few years.
For us, we're an unknown brand in the market, so trying to get awareness. We're a market leader in Germany. We've got lots of really big companies that we're working with, global supply chains, as well as some really interesting fleet-based businesses. But getting our name out into the UK market is probably the biggest challenge. I think generally within IT and logistics, it's a challenge because companies aren't necessarily willing to invest in digital transport solutions, and that's often because in today's kind of procurement focused kind of world, it often gets squeezed out of the solution because procurement businesses want the cheapest solution. They want to drive down margins of the 3PLs or the service providers, and then that means that the quite often these what's considered a luxury gets squeezed out. But actually, that luxury, I know can deliver significant bottom line savings. So it's less focus on the rate and more focus on the cost. I think the overall cost is what's required. Yeah.
And potentially therefore the profit for the organisations.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
okay, that's good. And what do you see the biggest opportunities and threats? And it could be some of the things you've said there for the sector in the
Yeah.
next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, I think, as I say, from a threat perspective, I think it's the investment challenge. I think the opportunity comes also from that as well, really. So it's transport is a growing importance within the sector. Companies are starting to realize the value that you could create out of it. And technology can be used to drive efficiency, reduce empty running, improve customer services. We can develop more green solutions. So you can certainly measure carbon. I think technology can be used to enhance collaboration between organisations as well. So I think there's lots of opportunities there if we can get companies to see the value and invest in it, definitely.
Okay, and with the continual development and expectation of visibility through supply chains. I'm told all around the world people want to be seeing where their container is, etc.
Yeah,
I'd imagine that must be an opportunity for organisations that you can help. Everything appear visibility maybe and almost a seamless process, won't you? So
exactly.
for
And the thing is, technology is getting better and better all the time. People talk quite often about the future and AI, but actually, if you think about how things have changed over a short period of time, you've now got more scalable systems, more internet-based solutions, and that kind of real-time visibility is something that is now available to companies. So they can start, you can then start to see how you can use technology to alert issues in advance, create alternative solutions, provide more kind of supply chain resilience within there as well, and ultimately improve customer service. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. And you mentioned earlier that obviously Solvares is very strong in the German market, and you
Yep.
mentioned collaboration. Is collaboration becoming more and more commonplace now, or are companies who are still resistant to it?
I think it is. Yeah, I think particularly in Europe, I would say. I think still there's a bit of resistance in the UK about sharing with competitors, but ultimately, if we're going to create a green supply chain, we've got to sort of start thinking outside of the norm and to challenge these resistances really, and for for the good of industry and the world, really. So
Yeah, and we're coming on to talk about the green transition, which
yeah,
is part of what everyone aspires to and wants to, but obviously the cost comes into it, makes it a challenge. So, um, um, what are people not talking about? In your conversations and your knowledge of the sector, that perhaps
yeah.
they should be.
Well, I think it's that. I mean, there's a lot of conversation around driver shortage in the industry, technology and AI, sustainability, and supply chain resilience. But I think the one thing that doesn't get talked about or gets kind of ignored a little bit is, technology gets talked up a lot by social media, but it's understanding kind of the detail and the issues that are involved in that. So, data quality, for example, not a lot of companies still have really poor data quality, and integration of systems. Everybody's got API solutions, which means that their systems can be easily integrated with, which is true. But when you're trying to connect to systems with different APIs, that kind of doesn't really help. You still need that middle kind of transition and process. So I see a very different kind of environment to what is portrayed in the media. I see a lot of companies who struggle with technology. They don't quite work, or as I say, the data quality is not good enough, because again, poor data in means the result is going to be poor as well. It's kind of feet on the ground, really, and understanding the problems that organizations have and solving those problems before, to almost like walking before you can run. So to make sure that the foundations are right within an organization, within the digital solution.
Yeah, I'm not a super technical expert, but when you talk about data quality, what is data quality? Is that the similar information come from two sources, or is it the actual lack of quality of the information that
Is
you say
accurate.
data quality?
Yeah, accurate data, really. So, for example, a simple thing like weights and measures of components. If your weights and measures are wrong, and you can be wrong by a factor of 100, 1,000, or if you've got your units of measure wrong slightly, and you're talking millimeters instead of meters, it can have a massive impact on. If you're optimizing transport and you think something is 1 meter by 1 meter cubed, for example, but actually it's only 10 centimeters cubed, that makes a massive difference. And quite often it's the customer's data quality. You can have the best systems in the world, but if that's not populated with the right data, you're going to make the wrong assumptions, and the system is going to be blamed for a result. Quite often it's the system that's blamed. That's actually as a result of something further down the line. I mean, the classic one as well is postcode incorrect address data. You might have the address of your head office rather than your delivery point. Now, no system is going to know that.
No.
It requires compliance in process to ensure that the right information is captured.
Yeah, and I imagine to validation as well. And um, one other conversation we've had in some of these podcasts before, I've talked about blockchain supply chains. Are
Yeah.
they becoming more or aspirational, or are they sort of more hopeful at the moment?
I would say it's probably more hopeful. I mean, blockchain was something that was another one of these sort of tech hypes that came out a few years ago, and I think it's fun. It's like a lot of the hype cycle. You get the burst of kind of like excitement around it, and then it sort of like it disappears for a bit, and then the technology comes back and it finds its place. Something like that kind of approach and management of standardization of data could be somewhere where blockchain could have a place. I can see that, but I think we're a little way away that yet, actually.
How do you see the green transition impacting your sector, Tim?
Yeah, so I think the first challenge is to measure. Companies have is to measure their carbon output, and utilizing a transport system of some kind is a good way of doing that. Particularly if you don't operate your own fleet, because if you operate your own fleet, you can measure the amount of fuel you use and you can kind of calculate it that way. But when you're using carriers, you have no visibility of that. So being able to, know the distance you're transporting, the kind of mode of transport that you're using, you can there's pretty good tools now for kind of accurately estimating the amount of CO2 that's generated in the shipping process. So, and companies are now responsible for their own, class three, not class three, but their own kind of scope 3 emissions that they are responsible for creating. So, and it's interesting because not only are the carriers having to report those emissions as their own scope 1, the customers also have to report those emissions as scope 3. So a system being able to capture that data, to know where you're delivering, to know the size of the consignment, the weight of the consignment, the mode of transport, and all of those factors means that you can estimate the CO2 generated, which is quite important.
And are you feeling big demand from your customers for more visibility, confirmation of the green green credentials, for want of a better word, so they can share it with their customer?
Yeah, definitely, it's coming. More and more companies are asking for, or certainly, looking at kind of green reporting, CO2 reporting, and how they generate that for their customers. But one benefit of of a TMS is that you can, you're kind of responsible for your part of the transport. So you're capturing that measurement when you're utilizing the vehicle. What you're not capturing is the empty running that then the carrier has as a result of that. But again, we talked a little bit about the development of systems now. There is technology available that means that those carriers can see when their vehicles are empty. They can monitor that, and they can monitor their empty running as well. And most carriers in the world we live in today, and the kind of margins they're working to, they're driven to reduce empty running as much as possible to make sure that their vehicles are consistently earning money, because they don't have the capacity or headroom to really to kind of not operate efficiently. So, but yeah, sorry.
Well, it's interesting you say that, and I didn't want to interrupt you, Tim, but in a low margin industry, which logistics traditionally is, that drive, for the green transition, to stop or reduce empty running, almost drives people towards, because they can't afford to run empty. So that's positive.
Yeah.
And going back to something we talked about earlier, do you think through systems like your businesses and hopefully some, collaboration, that the percentage of empty running, can be driven down and hopefully declared? And if it's going to be declared, do you think there's a way that people could declare it themselves, or would it need to be done through some sort of government legislation or guidance or mandate, for want of a better word?
Yeah, I think that I see more collaboration probably in Europe, but in this country, I think there's a bit of a reluctance. So companies are still very protective; they don't want to share that information necessarily, and I can see there being some, requirement for kind of government intervention at some point to drive the change in behaviour, because again, it's a very sort of master-slave relationship in logistics. You've got big procurement. We've got big procurement within organisation, driving down cost and squeezing the hauliers kind of as much as possible, but without that kind of consequence of that. So I think it's a challenge, but and I think companies are still reluctant to collaborate because they don't want to share information. They don't even want to share benefits with their competitors, really. So
yeah, and it'd be interesting. In the there's the Association of Pallet Networks. Obviously, they seem to do a lot of good things, and what they do is they all the pallet networks share their information with the association, and the association does reporting back on general views, like the weight, the type of pallet, the outlets, etc., and also becomes a good ambassador or guide for things like what the maximum weight per pallet should be. And I wonder if there could be some sort of association where people could report up, but they report back anonymously on behalf of the whole of 3PLs, 4PLs, transport companies, where then it could be the expectation of all companies is to have this amount of green credentials, almost like a standard, and also where the industry should be declaring it's empty running because because carrying out is the most expensive thing in the world, as anyone would know. So that's really good. Thanks for the point.
No, but the pallet networks are great, and they're a really good example of collaboration, actually. But you need almost need that third party in the middle to manage that, to ensure that there's kind of like it's independently controlled. And we see a lot of 4PLs in the industry now. It seems to be emerging all the time, and I think their place in the market is to try and remove empty running, because they're trying to work the assets between different customers, reducing empty running, and therefore generating a more green solution, but also more sustainable hopefully for the carriers as well.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, thank you. That's really interesting. What development in the sector has surprised you most in your career so far?
That's interesting. I wouldn't say it was one single development. I mean, there's been a few like outstanding kind of structural things that have happened over the past 30 odd years that I've been working. I mean, Pallet Networks is a really good example, actually, their emergence and how that's changed the industry from a transport perspective. But for me, and you'll know this as well, David, it's like when I started work, I had a desktop computer which had 648k bytes, I think it was, of memory, and 20 megabyte disk, and it was standalone. And everything was kind of like you put that computer there and you think, right, we're now computerized. Well, you're not really, because what you're doing is you're printing out memos or you're printing documents or letters to people. And if you think about how that has changed from that moment to where we are today, and the enormous kind of digitization of business generally, everything's email, everything's instant, you've got data available at your fingertips, and what a massive change. I mean, it's huge, isn't it? But I think on the converse side of that, I look at the transport industry and how customers are managing their transport. Technology is really, I mean, it has come in part, but the number of companies I still go to and they're manually planning transport. They might be using a spreadsheet, but they're manually planning at the end of the day, rather than using kind of the new technology. So I'm sort of surprised that we haven't had more uptake in technology, but then I'm not really surprised, really, because of the challenges that are in place in doing that,
and the investment, obviously, of changing systems, processes, technology, a whole lot. So, okay, and thank you so much for that, Tim. And the last question I'm asking everyone: if you could speak to the Prime Minister, then what would you ask them to do to assist your business grow and flourish?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say we're linked to the growth of the market and growth of markets because, big catalyst for change. I don't think companies really, well, not totally true, but a big catalyst for change is growth. I can't do this anymore without systems. I need to expand my capacity, or I need to do things in a different way. So that can be a big driver to growth. I mean, I could talk for quite a while about this topic, I think, because there is so much wrong with the country at the moment. We've come out of we've come out of Europe, and everybody complains about migrants, or migration. But actually, as a result of Brexit, we don't have enough people in the country to do the work. We've got an aging population. We've not got enough drivers. We've not got enough warehouse staff. And I think, in order to attract growth, you need people. You need people to do the work to then grow the markets as well. So I think there needs to be greater support for hauliers from an industry perspective. I think we have associations within logistics that kind of support hauliers, but I don't think they're vocal enough, or I think they're getting there. But again, it's been a slow transition, and mandatory payment terms. So reducing payment terms for carriage or for transport, more regulation. We talked about the potential that could have for green environment, the environment as well, but regulation to stop prices being driven down by over aggressive procurement teams, kind of thing, and then more kind of direction from kind of regulation around kind of businesses just solely focusing on shareholder profit, at the expense of environment, other companies, so suppliers and transport as well. So I think there's a load of things that you could, I'm sure there's a reason for a lot of these things, but I sit to myself and say, well, it's not that difficult, really, is it?
No, no, no. Well,
Shouldn't
look,
be.
no, you're right, Tim. So I just want to say thanks so much, Tim, for your time, and it's nice to find out about Solvares Group and what you do. I'm sure our listeners and viewers will really like it.